Eden, 9 shimmered like a sapphire in the void, a colony proud of its harmony with nature and technology. Its twin moons reflected the light of its distant sun onto coral-covered seas and crystalline towers. The city of Leora buzzed with quiet, controlled energy, children running past drone-pollinated gardens, engineers tuning solar relays on rooftops, and scholars teaching in open-air platforms that hovered gently over the jungle canopy. It was paradise, and paradise was about to die. Commander Vera Solis leaned on the balcony of her childhood home, taking a rare break from her orbital shift. Her leave had come just in time for her mother's birthday, and for a moment, everything felt simple. Down below, her parents lit paper lanterns and tied them to a garden vine, a tradition carried from Earth centuries ago. Vera's comlink beeped softly at her waist. She tapped it. "Solis here." "Commander, I'm sorry to interrupt your leave," said a voice she recognized, Lieutenant Rye from the orbital station. "We're tracking an object. It just bypassed our outer sensor net." Vera's heart tightened. "Bypassed? Is a stealth drone. Too big. Fast. No response to hails." She straightened. "I'm on my way." By the time her shuttle broke the atmosphere, the object was already above the colony, its form a jagged crescent of impossible blackness blotting out stars. No emissions, no markings, no sound. It opened. A pulse erupted, a sphere of white-hot energy expanding in silence. The station around her trembled. Vera watched as her home, the towers, the forests, the lanterns, were consumed in less than a breath. There was no fire, just absence, matter stripped from existence. The comms exploded with screams. And then static. Earth's United Systems Command received the distress signal 11 hours later. By then, Eden 9 was gone. No survivors. No known cause. Just scorched data and telemetry corrupted by gravitational anomalies. In the war room beneath the surface of New Geneva, President Arya Kalin stood before the holographic image of the destroyed colony, her hands clenched behind her back as the silence stretched long enough to make the admirals fidget. The rotating image showed a scorched crust, atmospheric loss, a planetary wound too precise to be natural. "We built Eden 9 to prove peace could thrive beyond Earth," she said, voice low. "Now it's a graveyard." Admiral Cale Reyes, broad-shouldered and silver-eyed, stepped forward. "Madam President, we have reason to believe this was not an act of nature. We've identified ion residues similar to those found in controlled annihilation weapons. Not pirates, not solar flares. This was surgical." President Kalin turned. "Are you saying this was a message? Or the beginning of a war?" Reyes replied. Another voice cut through, the youngest in the room. "We have to find who did this." Dr. Lennox unadjusted his glasses, his tone urgent but restrained. "If they possess this level of energy manipulation, they're beyond any current alien contact profile. This isn't just an attack. It's a breakthrough. A technological leap we've never seen before. Unless it is an alien," muttered someone. That silence again, colder now. President Kalin walked slowly to the central console. "I want a list of every faction, every empire, every forgotten station that could even dream of this." "And if the list comes back empty?" asked General Mordain. Kalin's jaw tightened. "Then we prepare the fleet, not for retaliation, for extinction." Vera Solis drifted through the wreckage of her home. The mission to recover Eden 9's data core had been authorized only hours ago, and she volunteered without waiting for permission. Now her dropship hovered just above the decimated colony. There was nothing left, not a single building, no bodies, no signs of war, just an endless expanse of ash fused into glass. She descended in a powered exosuit, the wind howling faintly as atmosphere continued to leak. Her visor beeped, locking onto buried remains of a communications node. "Signal ghost. Found something buried," she whispered, voice cracking. She knelt, pulling the half-melted black box free. Its surface bore a single scratch, words scorched but legible. They came from behind the veil. Vera stared at it, pulse racing. The phrase wasn't in any recognized database, but she'd heard it before, long ago, During her time in special operations, she'd reviewed an off-the-record incident involving a science vessel that disappeared in an uncharted system. The logs, mostly classified, mention a veil, a spatial phenomenon, or a weapon. She looked up, eyes narrowing. Whoever did this wasn't done. This was a test, and now it was their turn. Earth's orbit buzzed with unnatural energy. Thousands of warships, once mothballed or held in reserve, now floated in strategic formation. Shipyards on Luna, Titan, and even the Oort frontier activated for the first time in generations. Transports flowed like blood vessels through space, feeding the ever-growing armada. 700,000 ships, the largest fleet ever assembled by humanity. At the heart of it, the dreadnought Aegis Ascendant, flagship of Admiral Kale Reyes. Reyes stood in the CIC, watching hologram cycle through target systems. He knew this fleet wasn't just about war. It was about fear. The politicians needed a show of strength. The citizens needed revenge. And he needed answers. He called up the file marked Project Veil. It wasn't supposed to exist. Before the system finished decrypting, a new message pinged through priority channels. From Commander Vera Solis. Subject, Eden 9 Discovery. Attached, artifact phrase and spatial data. His eyes narrowed. "Bring her in," he ordered. "She's the only one who's been face-to-face with the aftermath, and she may have just given us our first lead." Vera stood on the observation deck of the Aegis Ascendant. Her reflection blurred against the black void outside. Below, the warships glinted like teeth in the dark. Her hair was tied back, her face carved with purpose. She hadn't spoken much since being retrieved from Eden 9, but Reyes understood silence. It was a language of grief and vengeance. He approached slowly. "I read your report." She turned. "And I believe you." That surprised her. "You think someone used Eden 9 as a proving ground?" Reyes nodded. "And I think they wanted us to see. Whatever the veil is, they've crossed it. They're daring us to follow." Vera's eyes flicked back to the stars. "Then let's give them what they want." Reyes followed her gaze. "The fleet launches in 6 hours. After that, there's no turning back." "I don't want to turn back," she said. "I want to make sure no one else dies the way my family did." As the alarm sounded for departure readiness, the two stood in silence, watching the engines ignite. The war had not yet begun, but humanity had already made its choice. They would answer destruction with fire. The launch sequence rippled through the spine of the Aegis Ascendant. A silent tremor felt in the bones more than heard in the ears. In every corner of the massive dreadnought, systems came alive. Reactor cores hummed, AI modules linked in, and millions of sensors blinked to green. Around it, the fleet stretched into infinity. Warships of every class, formation after formation, waiting like wolves on a leash. 700,000 vessels, all of them armed, all of them angry. Admiral Kale Reyes stood in the center of the CIC, hands clasped behind his back, his mind racing through probabilities and permutations. On the surface, he was every inch the seasoned commander, decorated, unshakable, precise. But beneath the calm exterior, something coiled. Not fear, not yet, but a gnawing tension. Too many things about Eden. 9 didn't make sense, and war, no matter how justifiable, had a way of clouding the truth. He didn't trust easy answers. And this answer, an unknown enemy, a godlike weapon, and one colony erased, was far too convenient. "Fleet is at 98% launch readiness," said Commander Lyra Trent, his chief of staff. Her voice clipped and efficient. "Only Sector 49 is lagging, AI subsystem recalibrating." Reyes nodded without looking at her. "Push it. I want full dispersal in an hour." Across the deck, a viewport opened. Through it, the fleet shimmered. The titanic scale of it wasn't lost on him, nor was the danger. He turned as the door hissed open. Commander Vera Solis entered, her stride sharp, her exosuit removed now, leaving her in standard command blacks. Her face was unreadable, but the loss hadn't softened her. It had forged something colder. "Focused. You wanted to see me," she said. Reyes gestured toward the holodeck. "We've pulled the phrase from your black box report. They came from behind the veil. We ran it through historical archives, covert logs, even myth cycles. It pops up once. He tapped the interface. An image bloomed, a derelict research station, drifting lifeless beyond the edge of the Oort expanse. The name was barely legible under frost and corrosion. Project Veilgate. Unauthorized research into dark energy rift anomalies, he said. Shut down 80 years ago. Disavowed by Earth Command. The files were sealed until yesterday. So Lise frowned. You think they built something? Something that destroyed Eden 9? Or opened something they couldn't close? Reyes said, We're not chasing ghosts, Commander. We're chasing ourselves. She stepped closer, watching as distorted video played from the station's last log. Static. Screams. A figure dissolving into nothing mid-sentence. That's not war, she whispered. That's erasure. Reyes turned to her, voice low. This is the part where I'm supposed to say we're doing this to protect humanity. But I'm not sure that's true anymore. If we go in blind, we could be delivering 700,000 ships into a slaughterhouse. Then let me lead recon. So Lee said, Small unit, stealth drives, go dark beyond the veil. If there's something waiting, we find it before the fleet does. Reyes studied her, weighing conviction against risk. Finally, he nodded. Prep the ghost wing. You leave in 4 hours. Elsewhere on the Aegis, the mood was anything but steady. Dr. Lennox sat hunched in a dim, curved lab, walls covered in floating threads of data. His fingers trembled over a haptic console as he cross-referenced gravitational shifts from Eden 9's remains with older records, ones not stored on any public server. The results didn't match any alien tech profiles. They matched Earth-based experimental models, specifically ones involving spatial compression. He cursed under his breath and hit a secured comet buzz twice, then connected to an encrypted channel. Senator Draxon, he said quietly, I found a correlation. Eden 9 wasn't destroyed by an enemy. It was compressed, folded out of phase. Someone used the veil. Someone who knows how. On the other end, silence. Then Draxon's voice, smooth and cold. Doctor, your access to fleet systems is a privilege. One you'll lose if you speak to anyone else about this. On's breath caught. You knew. You. I suspected, Draxon said, voice like static under silk. Eden 9 was necessary. A controlled detonation to unify a fractured Earth. 7 centuries of infighting. No threat, no unity. On's hands curled into fists. You sacrifice a colony for a show of strength. I revealed our weakness so we could prepare. We've always known unity would require fire. The line went dead. On stared at the darkened screen, then at the weaponized algorithms dancing across his data feeds. He could bury this, or he could expose it. But either way, someone else now had the power to break galaxies. Vera Solis boarded the Ghost Wing with a crew of 5, elite pilots, analysts, and her old recon second, Nyla Hessa, a silent, sharp-eyed woman with a rifle named Mercy. They launched in silence, cutting through space like a whisper. Behind them, the fleet began its crawl toward the veil. 3 hours in, everything changed. They passed the edge of the known star charts. Then the sensors warped, literally bent, data streaming sideways across the displays. Space shimmered like heat above pavement. And then, it was gone. The stars, the darkness, the galaxy itself. They were inside the veil. The Ghost Wing coasted forward, engines dampened. Ahead, something floated, a structure so vast it dwarfed moons. It pulsed with inverted light, like it had been built in a reality that never formed. Lines twisted in impossible geometry. Solis stared at it, her voice barely a breath. This is an alien. Hessa zoomed in. It's human. Look at the material alloys. The team went still. Solis activated a transmission burst back to the fleet, encrypted low band. But nothing got through. No signal. No echo. Just silence. Back in Aegis, the countdown hit 0. Engines ignited. The great ships moved as one. The veil waited. Rhea stood on the bridge, watching the edge of space distort as the first wave pierced the boundary. He didn't know if they were going to war, or into the mouth of something they created, and could never control. The veil rippled around the ghost wing like a sea of broken glass, suspended in a silence so absolute it felt as if sound itself had been exiled. Inside, Commander Solis gripped the command cradle, her eyes scanning the flickering displays. The ship's systems lagged half a second behind reality, barely noticeable, but enough to instill unease in even the most seasoned pilot. And Solis was far from unseasoned. Ghosting field stable, but we're drifting 3 degrees off navlock. Nyla Hessa muttered from the helm, her fingers dancing over the tactile pad. I'm compensating. Good. Keep it clean, Solis replied, her voice low. We're not here to make noise. They'd been inside the veil for 11 hours now, and each one had peeled another layer off their understanding of space. The laws they knew, physics, light, gravity, been inside this place like paper soaked in oil. Time itself felt stretched thin, like a whisper heard through a storm. And then came the structure. It loomed ahead like a god's forgotten monument. Angular, vast, wrong in its very construction. No curves, only cruel intersecting lines, built in impossible symmetry. A station, maybe, a vessel, or a prison. It pulsed not with light, but with its absence, drawing the edges of space around it. We're detecting biosigns, whispered Dr. Thalen, their onboard xenobiologist. 4 distinct readings. Human. Solis leaned closer. That's not possible. No transponders, Thalen continued, voice tight. No life support signals. Just residual heat and EM fluctuations. Like echoes. Suit up, Solis ordered. We're going in. The landing bay was like stepping into a dream dissected by nightmare. Massive, empty, and slick with material none of them could identify. It reflected their forms in fragments, as if the station itself was trying to remember what humans looked like. Their mad boots clanked as they moved, rifles leveled, breath echoing in sealed helmets. Solis led, Hessa on her flank, with Thalen and the tech pair trailing. The air was breathable, but foul with ozone and something that reminded Solis of burnt plastic and wet iron. Look at the markings, Hessa murmured, sweeping her flashlight across the wall. Strange glyphs were carved deep into the metal, repeating symbols that pulsed slightly under the beam, as if alive. Thalen took a step closer. Some of these matched fragments found in the Veilgate archives. Old language patterns, constructed, not natural. Artificial intelligence, maybe something older than that. They reached the corridor's end. There, sprawled across the floor in a halo of dried blood and scorched plating, lay a man, or what remained of one. Solis knelt, examining him. Human, or once human. His body was twisted, elongated, stretched out as if space had tried to forget how tall he was. His face was intact enough to see terror etched in the final moment of his life. But what caught Solis's eye was the badge still affixed to his chest. Project Veilgate. Level 9 clearance. She stood slowly, her voice a whisper through the comm. He was one of ours. Commander, Hessa said urgently, pointing down the hallway. There's more. They found a chamber filled with bodies, some in preserved stasis, others frozen mid-action, caught in an invisible pause. A woman reached for a console, her fingers inches away. A child, impossibly out of place, floated near the ceiling, eyes wide in suspended fear. The room was a mausoleum of time. Not death. Not yet. Thalen's voice cracked. I think this station isn't abandoned. It's paused, like it's stuck between one tick of the clock and the next. Solis looked around. Something is holding them. Something that isn't done yet. Suddenly, every light went out. Back in real space, the Aegis Ascendant emerged from the veil's edge, its massive hull slicing through space like a knife through fog. The rest of the fleet followed, but not all made it cleanly. A third of the Vanguard ships blinked out of formation the moment they passed through. No explosions, no signals. Just gone. Reyes watched it happen from a bridge. The horror held tight behind Commander's mask. Any return pings? Negative, Admiral. Elira, Trent replied. No debris. No escape pods. Nothing. He turned to the sensor officer. What are we seeing? Unknown spatial interference. It's not jamming us. It's rewriting the signal paths, folding them. Another ship vanished, and then another. Reyes spoke calmly, but the steel was unmistakable. All ships hold position. Prepare reverse vector. We're not going deeper until we know what we're stepping into. But something had other plans. The veil pulsed, and then space screamed. The Aegis shook, hard, systems blaring warnings across every deck. Out the viewport, the void began to fracture, lines of pure darkness opening like scars. Something massive moved beyond the cracks. Not a ship, not a creature, a concept made manifest. Alira gripped her console, voice-breaking protocol. "Admiral, what is that?" Reyes didn't answer, because he didn't know, but part of him suspected. Inside the derelict station, the Ghost Wing team flickered back into light. The lights returned one by one, harsh and white, illuminating the chamber in sterile clarity. The frozen figures were gone. So was Thalen. Solis turned in a circle, weapon raised. "Report." Thalen's signal is scrambled, Hessa said. "No movement. It's like he was never here." He was... Solis snapped, scanning the room. "We're not alone." The walls began to shift. Not physically, but perceptually. Symbols rearranged. The station reconfigured its geometry. A hallway that once led to the landing bay now stretched into a black corridor filled with red haze. And then the voice came. It wasn't a sound. It was an invasion. Thoughts pressed into their minds, foreign yet intimate. "Why do you return?" Solis froze. "Who's speaking?" The voice didn't repeat. Instead, the haze parted, and they saw it. An entity of light and shadow, vaguely human in outline, but shifting constantly. It stood at the far end, motionless. Hessa raised her rifle. "Stand down, we are not hostile." The figure tilted its head. The walls shuddered. "You burned the gate. You cut the tether. You left the wound open." Solis stepped forward. "We didn't build this. We didn't understand it. Tell us what you are." "We are consequence." The figure disappeared. In its place was Thalen, alive but altered. His eyes were black. His skin shimmered like oil underwater. "I saw it," he said. "All of it. The veil isn't a boundary. It's a membrane, and we're on the wrong side." Solis caught him as he stumbled forward. "What do you mean?" Thalen gripped her shoulder. "This place, it's not just between realities. It creates them. Every thought, every fear, every decision. It gives them shape. That's why the station looks human. It's feeding off us." "And the fleet?" Hessa asked. Thalen's eyes locked on hers, hollow. "If they cross deeper into the veil, they won't come back as themselves." Above the veil's surface, the fleet began to fracture. Reyes watched as command ships started reporting anomalies, duplicate signals, contradictory telemetry. One ship claimed to see 5 Aegis vessels in formation. Another reported hearing their own destruction on a channel that hadn't transmitted yet. Reality was becoming subjective. The veil wasn't just distorting the universe. It was asking every ship a question. And the answers weren't human. Not anymore. The veil began to hum. Not through sound, but through sensation. Like a vibration felt along the nerves, threading into the marrow of every soul within the fleet. On the bridge of the Aegis Ascendant, Admiral Reyes stood motionless, eyes fixed on the fractured horizon beyond the viewport. Each second, more ships flickered. Not destroyed, not displaced. Transformed. "We're losing integrity across spatial nodes 12 through 17, Alira Trent said, her voice strained, jaw locked against fear. "Sensor data is collapsing into non-Euclidean formats. Our computers can't render the region in standard geometry anymore." Reyes didn't look at her. "They're being rewritten." The helm officer, Lieutenant Crane, turned. "Sir, are we under attack?" Reyes answered slowly, as if dredging the words from deep water. "No, we're being asked to define ourselves." Silence swept across the bridge. Behind Reyes, data bloomed and warped. Fleet diagnostics replaced with unfamiliar scripts, symbols swimming through the air like living things. He reached forward and shut off the projection. "Have we received anything from the Ghost Wing?" "Still dark," Alira said. Their last ping was registered 12 hours ago. We haven't had a solid lock since they crossed the Veil's core. Rhea stepped back, away from the static-fed screens, away from the storm clawing at a sense of order. Recall every forward ship. Pull the fleet to the event boundary and hold formation. I don't want another ship crossing until I understand what happened to the first 1,000. But the Veil's alive. Alira hesitated. Holding might not matter. Then we'll learn what it wants. Deep within the heart of the Veil, aboard the derelict construct, Commander Solis led her remaining team through a corridor that was no longer made of matter, but of memory. The walls shimmered with fragments, flickers of her childhood home, her first command, the expression on her sister's face before deployment. Private, hidden thoughts projected like scenery. Hessa reached out to steady her. It's bleeding into our heads. No, Thalen said behind them, his voice quieter now, more human. It is our heads. We're inside a reactive construct. It reflects the observer. That's why the station is rearranging. It's becoming a composite of every mind within it. Solis halted at a circular chamber where the walls bent in impossible curvature, forming a sphere that radiated warmth and cold in alternating waves. In the center hovered a singularity, stable, shimmering with concentric rings that pulsed with rhythmic grace. This is the core, Thalen whispered, eyes wide. This is what powers the Veil. This is it. Solis approached cautiously, studying the energy signature. It wasn't nuclear, not gravitational, not even dark matter-based. It pulsed like consciousness itself. She turned to Hessa. Broadcast. Tight beam to the fleet. Maybe we can cut through the interference. Trying, Hessa said, tapping at her forearm console. Signal's unstable. If we push it hard enough, it'll break through for maybe 10 seconds. Make it count. Solis stared at the singularity, drew a breath, then stepped into its orbit. The moment she did, her thoughts scattered. For a second, she wasn't in the chamber. She was in Eden 9. It was before the fall. Children laughing, market stalls humming, skybound trams floating across coral pink skies. She turned a corner and saw herself standing in uniform, smiling. She blinked. Then the world caught fire. Everything collapsed in an instant. Buildings peeled away. Light bent and folded. And then nothing. Just dust and that same voice. You knew the cost. Still you built the gate. She staggered backward as the vision snapped away. Her team was frozen, locked mid-breath. The Veil had pause time again. Except for her. You're trying to speak, Solis said aloud, not to anyone present, but to the intelligence, if it could be called that, lurking in the Veil's core. You're not just mimicking us. You're trying to communicate. The singularity flared. And then words appeared in the air, not spoken, not transmitted, simply there. The first wound bleeds still. You ask why it hurts. You are why. The chamber darkened. Images flickered around her. Project Veilgate. Experiments using temporal anchors. Space-time torn open to mine what lay beyond. Weapons tested in secret. Experiments that went too far. And Earth Command had buried it all. Eden 9 was a mistake, Solis whispered. We never meant to. Intent is no armor. Your species divides, multiplies, consumes. You built a mirror into oblivion and found only your own hunger. She dropped to one knee as the pressure in the room increased. Her mind strained against a force of consciousness vast beyond imagining. It wasn't malevolent, but it was judging. Then the light faded. Time resumed. Her team gasped, startled to find her on the ground. Hessa rushed over. Solis, what happened? You vanished for a second. No, she said, steadying herself. We all did. It just let me come back first. She rose and faced the singularity again. We can't stay, but we can warn the others. Signals ready, Hessa said, holding up the device. 10 seconds max. Solis activated the beacon. This is Commander Vera Solis. Task Force Ghostwing. Fleet Command, this is not enemy territory. It is a reflective boundary, a mirror field. The Veil interprets thought. Project's reality. Eden 9 didn't die by invasion. It was consumed by the reflection of what we are. You cannot fight this with ships. Only with clarity. Stand down. Fall back. The message cut out. On the Aegis Ascendant, Rhea stood before a flickering display as Solisa's transmission bled through in fragments. He stared into the projection of her face, distorted by the veil's interference, but unmistakably resolute. Then the signal went dead. "Bring the fleet about," Rhea said. Trent turned. "Sir, we go back. All of us." "But—" "All of us," Reyes repeated. "If we push deeper, we lose more than lives. We lose ourselves." The command relayed across the network. The ships responded slowly at first, then all at once, like an instinct remembered. The veil pulsed again. But this time it did not resist. The fleet turned, and space began to mend. Hours later, the ghost wing emerged on the far side of the veil, battered but intact. The fleet had pulled back, positioned in a defensive arc just beyond the event boundary. Thousands of ships, still whole. Solis stepped onto the Aegis's deck in silence. Reyes met her there. "What did you see?" he asked quietly. She hesitated. "Not an enemy. A consequence. A consciousness shaped by our own projections." He nodded once. "Then war isn't the answer. It never was." She looked out the viewport. The veil shimmered in the distance, no longer hostile, but not passive either. "Waiting. We didn't unleash war," she said. "We uncovered a mirror. And now," Rhea said, voice quiet as the stars, "we decide what it shows us next."